Namaste and welcome to Itihasdhir. So, the book that we are discussing today is Mrs. Priya Arora's Rama, a Man of Dharma. And we've heard so much about Lord Ram. Lord Ram has been a central figure to many, not only those who pray to him, but also those who actively follow what's been going around in India. Uh, it is a testament to the crores of people who visited Ayodhya in the past 1 year alone after the Ram Janmasthan Mandir has come up. So we're very happy to be discussing Mrs. Arora's book here with the author herself, of course. And so, yeah, let's start with that. I want to understand, ma'am, how did you go about writing this book? What inspired you to write it? Because we've all seen that there are hundreds of books about Ram, about Ramayana, and there is a continuous churning of books as well. People are still writing about him. So, what defines Lord Ram? Why do we still talk about him so much, apart from the subject of the Astha, of course? And what inspired you to write about him?
So there are two questions there that you've asked me. First of all, thanks for having me on your
It
show.
is
I
our
really
pleasure.
appreciate it. And yeah, so to come back to your questions, the first one is what inspired me. The second one is um, why the Ramayana when there's so many. Is that right?
Yes.
So, what inspired me was really, I came to this not as a story. I came to this from Vedanta. So, I'm essentially a student of Vedanta, and I embarked on this path about 12 years ago. And what I found about Vedanta is it is it gives you such mental strength to deal with any problem that you have in life, and it's not a religious solution. It is a Vedanta, I would say, is almost like a self-help manual. It teaches you to develop that inner strength to face situations in life that just come upon you. So, in my case, I have a son with special needs. He's autistic. And I was very, very, very stressed with that situation. But when I got into looking at things from the Vedantic point of view, and that took a long time, I found that, my whole outlook to the problem changed. And my mental state also changed for the better. So when I read the Ramayana, I was reading it from the point of view of Vedanta because Sri Ram is actually a walking, talking exemplar of whatever Vedanta teaches you. So if you want a role model of Vedanta, it is Sri Ram. And that's why it appealed to me. So I didn't write the book to retell the story, even though it's called a retelling of Valmiki's Ramayana. That was not the important part because, as you said, there are many retellings and many beautiful ones. There's nothing special that I can do. I mean, this story has been going on for thousands of years. So, it's like not even in the recent past, but for millennia, it's been retold. In India, there are Ramayanas in versions of the Ramayana in every state. Every state has its own, and they vary. The story varies. The basic story is the same, but episodes change. Then in other countries in the world, there are so many Ramayanas. I did not know this till I looked into it, but there's a Thai Ramayana, there's the Indonesian Ramayana, there's even Mongolian Ramayanas. There's so many different kinds. But what I felt that I could do differently was to bring Valmiki's message. And Valmiki's message was not to tell a story that was for entertainment, even though the Ramayana is very entertaining. It's as entertaining as any bestseller novel you can pick up. I will say that. And it's been that for thousands of years again,
Yes.
as entertaining. But that's not its purpose. Valmiki composed the Ramayana to showcase Dharma. which is why I call my book Rama, a Man of Dharma, because that is the main purpose with which he embarked on this whole project. And he says that right at the opening, he says that he wants to know. He asks his Guru Narada, if you see the way the book starts, Valmiki asks his Guru Narada, do you know a person who walks amongst us today in our
mm,
current
mm.
times, who is a dharmagnya, a person who understands dharma? So that was the purpose. And my whole retelling is from that point of view. So it shows him as a man of dharma, as a man who is a walking, talking exemplar of Vedanta. That's basically where I'm coming from in the book.
So, ma'am, just a follow-up question. I mean, when we talk about Sri Krishna, for example, over
Mhm.
a lot of time, I think it was Srila Prabhupada ji who attached the fountain of Godhead, if I'm not wrong, the phrase
Mhm.
to Krishna, right? So,
Krishna.
when we
Yes.
talk about Ram, the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, that he is a man of dharma. We
Uh-huh.
we sort of even today, do you think that that impacts how we see him and how we sort of also question the decisions that he made as a king?
Mhm.
Whereas if Krishna did something, we tend to take it more as a leela of his, or sort of
Uh-huh.
accept it as something that God did. But
Mhm.
you know, because we think of Ram as a man who embodies dharma itself, who is a knower of dharma,
Mhm.
we sort of question his decisions, maybe try to understand it.
No, I like that question. It's a good question. And I'll tell you why. Because it's natural for us in a modern world today to have these doubts. Nothing wrong with it. So there are episodes in the Ramayana, even more in the Mahabharata, but since we are talking about the Ramayana, where you wonder why Sri Ram is doing what he's doing, which seems not morally right. It seems to us. So that question comes in the mind. And the beauty of our Sanatana Dharma is you can ask any questions you like. You know, it is a very broad minded, liberal, open minded philosophy. And nobody is going to get into trouble if they have doubts. And in fact, it's a good thing to ask those questions because only when you ask will you have doubt resolution. How can your doubt be resolved if you're thinking something in your mind and you're saying, no, no, I can't ask. It's bad to ask because if I ask, then people will think that I'm saying things about Sri Ram. No, Sri Ram would have wanted you to ask. So the thing is, the reason why we have confusion is because we do not understand the concept of dharma. We seriously don't, because the that word dharma is not a word that you can translate into any English word. There is no exact word for dharma. It's not that you can't explain it. You can, of course, you can explain it. It takes, some time to explain it, but it can be done. But you cannot translate it. So when it is translated, people find the closest word to it. So it's translated as, unfortunately, which is not close to it, religion,
Which is tant.
which is people say mera dharma hai, and when they say that they're really meaning it's their religion, right?
Mm,
Now dharma has got nothing to do with religion.
mm,
So straight away when you translate it as that, it's a wrong translation. Then it's translated as duty. Duty is part of dharma, but it's not the entirety of dharma. It's also translated as righteousness. Righteousness comes close, but it's not perfect. I always say it's like, if you're a lady and you've ever matched a sari with a blouse, for a sari, you go to the shop and they'll show you 100, little samples. And some of them come close, but not quite. So
mm.
righteousness is like that. Comes close, but not quite. So what is this dharma? See, dharma in the Sanskrit, what the Sanskrit word means is it means the right thing to do in that particular circumstance, which is for the good of the many. So there are three aspects to it. One is it's the right thing to do. Second is it's the right thing to do in that
in that
circumstance.
situation.
And the third is it has to be for the general good, not just for your personal good. If you're doing something which is you think the right thing to do, but it's ending up only for your personal good, then that's not dharma. You see? So if you understand dharma from that point of view, and then you look at what Sri Ram did, then the understanding is quite different. Then you don't misunderstand it. So misunderstanding is really coming from a wrong notion of what dharma is. Because what we do is we equate dharma with morality, that this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing. I'll give you an example. There are two places, especially, maybe three, but two main ones where Sri Ram is questioned, where we question his action. One is in the killing of Vali, right? That would be the first one that happens in the story. Because he kills Vali when Vali is fighting with Sugriva, right? And he kills him from an unseen vantage. He is near a tree. He's not like facing Vali. So if you look at it from the point of morality, this is wrong. It's wrong. You can't be fighting, you can't interfere when two people are fighting, and that too from an unseen place, and then try and it's not okay. Now, how did a dharmatma like Sri Ram do that? That is the question. So you have to understand that dharma is, remember the 3 points I said, the right thing to do in that circumstance for the good of the many. Now take the situation. Vali had this necklace which was given to him by Indra. Now Indra was his father. So he gave him this necklace, which it was a magic necklace. And what it did is it would sap the energy from his opponent. Anybody who stood in front of Vali could not defeat Vali because all the energy that that person had would come to Vali because of the necklace. It had like kind of like a magnetic force or whatever you could call it. I don't know. It would pull that person's energy. So you could not win. Now, Vali had to be taken out. Why did Vali have to be taken out? Because Vali had become sort of like a terrorist in a way, because he had, he had kidnapped his brother's wife,
Right.
his younger brother's wife, against her will, and he had kept her and in a relationship which was not acceptable. In it was not a socially acceptable thing to do, to kidnap her and to have a relationship with her of the kind that he was having, right? Especially because one, it was his younger brother's wife. Two, it was against her will. Actually, that's one. It was against her will. So the punishment for that was a death sentence, right? Now, justice had to be done, right? Sri Ram had to do justice to Ruma, for Ruma, who was the woman he had taken. How would he do that? It was not possible to do it. He could not kill Vali, because if he had stood in front of Vali, what would have happened?
He would
His
have
strength would have gone to
to,
Vali.
yes,
And then what's the point of that? Right? So, in that circumstance, second point, it was the right thing to do because Vali had to be taken out. Two, in that circumstance, it was the only way Vali could be taken out. Right? And then it was for the good of the many. Why? Because Vali and when you become a thorn to society, right, you have to take out the one for the good of the many. And we have done that in our modern times. You know, when Osama bin Laden was taken out, how was he taken out? He was not taken to court. Our modern society tells us that when somebody commits a crime, they're supposed to be taken to court, they're supposed to be tried. All that is, they're supposed to be given due process, right? But if you're in a situation where that terrorist cannot be given due process, there is no means of doing that, and you take him out in the middle of the night, completely unfairly, can you say that that is an adharma? Or do you say it's dharma? Because you're preventing the loss of many more lives.
Many lives.
You're preventing more injustice. So now, when you look at the Wali situation with these eyes, that yes, it was unfair. Yes, it was not moral in the strict sense of the word, but it was dharmic. So morality and dharma often overlap, but they're not the same. Because if you follow just morality, like, blindly, and you say, no, 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 I can't, do this. I have to stand in front of Vali. I will not do that. Morality says I will stand in front of him. Those are the battle principles. And then Vali kills you. And have you solved the problem? Because you have not. He's still going strong. In fact, you have enabled Vali by, see, inadvertently, by trying to follow morality to the T, you have enabled Vali's adharma. So you've not helped the situation at all. So now you see what Ram, and we criticize Sri Ram for this, but so did Vali. When Vali was dying, the first thing he said to him was, I thought you were
Yeah.
this great dharmatma, and you should have stood in front of me. If you had stood in front of me, you wouldn't have been able to kill me. He says that. And he says, how can you do this adharma? You know, I am shocked that someone like you, with this reputation that you have of being so dharmic, did something like this, that is so adharmic. Because it's the law of battle that you don't interfere, right? And then Sri Ram explains what I've explained to you about dharma. He explains to him, he says to him, in fact, he says, you're questioning me because you don't understand dharma. And he explained to him. And then Vali understood. And then you know what happened to Vali? Vali felt so contrite. He felt so sad that he had done what he had done. And he said, I agree. I was wrong. And my punishment is deserved. He understood that before he died. And he died, having understood his wrong, and he asked for forgiveness. So he was redeemed in death in a way because he understood his wrong. So yeah, that is the story of Bali. The other one is with when he sent Sita ji away. That is another thing that big thing that people say, oh, how could he send his wife away just because one dhobi said, right? That's the other, is that
Yes.
the other big thing?
Yes.
So should I go on with that, or
Please,
it's
please. Yes.
running
It's a
long?
very important episode to cover.
Yeah. So, first of all, a lot of the misunderstanding comes from not reading Valmiki's Ramayana.
Hmm.
So, in other Ramayanas, there may be incidents where the way it's narrated is one dhobi was upset with his wife, and then because of that, Sri Ram got upset and said that, I'm sending my wife away. It seems like that's not the way it's narrated at all. And in Valmiki Ramayana. In Valmiki Ramayana, it's a completely different narrative. And Valmiki Ramayana is the only one that's itihas. Huh?
Hmm.
All the others, I'm not saying anything against them. They're beautiful in their own way, but they're not itihas.
Itihas. Yeah.
So if you are judging a person, you should judge him based on the itihas, not based on what a poet may have written out of
Hmm.
his imagination, right? You have to judge a person based on what happened, not based on fantasy.
Yeah.
So if you look at the Valmiki Ramayana, what happened was that when they came back from Lanka, they were very happy for 2 years. Sri Ram and Sita. They were very happy, and they were, and then after 2 years, she tells him that she's expecting a child, and he's so happy because this child would be a possible heir to the throne. So that was a big thing in those days. And he says to her, he says, "Tell me if there's something I can give you as a gift. I'm so happy to hear this. What can I give you?" And she says, you can't give me anything. I have everything I want. I'm very happy. There's nothing you can give me. He says, okay, something. So she says, only thing I can say is that I miss the tranquility of the ashrams. When we were in Vanvas, the ashrams were so tranquil and beautiful, and we had such good satsang there. I miss that. So let me go and visit for a few days. I'll also get blessings for our unborn child. So he says, sure, I'll arrange tomorrow morning itself, I'll arrange for you to go. So they are all happy. Now, Sri Ram had a habit of getting feedback from the marketplace about the pulse of the nation. And they didn't have market surveys like they have today, but he did his own market survey. So he had people on his payroll. They were not, spies as such. They were like a dhobi, a potter, a carpenter, a blacksmith, people, ordinary people.
mm,
They would go and get information and come and tell him in the evening about what people were thinking. And the reason he did that is he wanted to proactively solve problems. He didn't want a situation where the people were upset about something and he didn't know, because not everybody comes and tells the king that this is not okay, I'm not happy with this. So he would try and find out surreptitiously so that he would know. That evening, after he had this conversation with Sita, that evening, this dhobi called Bhadra comes to meet him. And Bhadra says, he asks Bhadra, he says, Bhadra, is everything okay in the city? Is people are happy and all that? Tell me, what is the news? Bhadra says everything is fine. But the way Bhadra says it, he says it in a very, like as if he's hiding something. So
mm,
then Sri Ram he was a very astute person, right? So he read his face and he said, Bhadra, you're not telling me everything. Please feel free to tell me the truth, even if it's something to do with someone near and dear to me. If it's my brothers, if it's my mother, if it's me, even if it's me, whoever it is that the people may have a problem with, tell me, because I know you're keeping something back. So then Bhadra very reluctantly says, okay, if you insist, I'll tell you. People are saying you did a great job by killing Ravan because he was such a bad guy. But this is important. The people are saying that you have done wronged them. You have done them an injustice by bringing Sita back and making her their queen again, because they don't accept her. They don't feel that she should be their queen. Now, this is a situation where he's a dharmic king, right? He cannot unhear what he's heard. Bhadra didn't want to tell him, but once he told him, he's heard it, right? Now, the people in those days, the Vedic kings ruled, were not as autocrats. They were never autocrats. Our Vedic kings were administrators. If you look at the Arthashastra, Chanakya says that. He says the king's happiness will be in the happiness of his people. In keeping his people happy, the king will find happiness. He's not there to be served and treated treated like royalty by everybody. He's there as an administrator. So it was surprisingly democratic. You know, though they had kings, the governance was quite democratic because it depended on the people. The people's decision was very important. And he had a parishad. They had a parishad that decided all these things. So anyway, so now he was thrown into a quandary. because the people did not want her. The people were unhappy because they said, we do not want her as our queen. For whatever reason, they felt that she had lived in Ravan's house for a year, and they felt that that was reason enough for them not to want her. Now, what would a dharmic king do? He had four options, right? These are the four options he had, and I've listed them in my book. So, option number one would be I didn't hear it. Ignore it. Nobody would have known. Bhadra didn't even want to tell him. Bhadra's not going to go telling other people. So he could have ignored it. But Dharma does not allow you to do that, right? So he could not do that. Second option, okay, you don't like my wife. I love my wife, which he loved her dearly. I'm leaving everything and I'm going back to the forest with my wife. Cheers, bye. He could have said that, but that was also not possible because for a dharmic king, it's dereliction of duty. You cannot just for your personal happiness give up your duty. It's like, nowadays, if you look at it, think of a soldier in the army. Can he just leave the battle and say that, listen, I'm going? It's a dereliction of duty.
mm,
He can't. And so, if you, and that was the kind of sentiment that Sri Rama had in those days for duty. So that option was out. Third option was what? He could have sent her back to Raja Janak and said that, it's not working out. The people don't want. And he could have married again. But he could not do that. Why? Because he loved her so dearly. The thought of sending her back to her father, which was, it was great insult to do that. And also to marry somebody else was unthinkable for him. He loved her and no other woman.
mm,
So that was out. So there was only one option left. She had said that she wanted to go to the ashrams for a visit. She didn't say she wanted to be there forever, right? She said she wanted to go for a visit. So he could have, the only option that was left to him was that, okay, let me put her in an ashram and she will be safe there. She will be happy there. And if things change, there's still the opportunity for her to come back. So it was a separation, not a complete divorce. Let's put it that way. And that was the best of the bad options. Is there a third, a fourth, fifth option? I don't think there was a fifth option. So in that circumstance, he did the only thing that he could do in order to be dharmic, to maintain dharma. Because any other option he chose would not have been a dharmic option. Now, was this a good option? Was it unfair to Sita? Yes, it was terribly unfair to her. But it was also unfair to himself because how he suffered in her absence, to do that requires tremendous character. Just think of us. It's so hard for us to do even one thing that is against our own self interest. If there's a choice, it takes great character to put your self interest second and put the interest of the people first, which is what he did. He put the interest of his Raj Dharma over
mm,
his personal dharma as a husband. So his Raj Dharma he put above his Pati Dharma. And there was no choice in this. It was a tussle between the two. Only one he could have been chosen. He could have chosen his Pati Dharma or his Raj Dharma. The Pati Dharma would have been a personal choice. And this thing actually happened, if you know, in 1936, I think it was, Edward VIII of England abdicated the throne. And he
in
said
favor.
famously, I'm abdicating the throne for the woman I love,
Mm,
right? Because he wanted to marry Wallis Simpson, who was
yeah.
thrice divorced. She was American and thrice divorced. And this was not acceptable to the British. This exactly the same thing. They were not okay with her being queen, right? So what did he do? He chose the personal
Yeah,
option.
abdicate.
He says, no, no, I will then leave. So he did not put Raj Dharma above his personal well being, but Sri Ram did.
And that very nearly toppled the British monarchy, I mean. So we can see what kind of an effect it would have sort of had in public faith as well if Sri Ram put his own needs before the needs of his praja. And I think,
Yeah,
isn't there like an episode as well where Sri Ram sort of mentions that then people will talk about me in the same tone that they talk about my father, in the sense that his father promised the praja that Sri Ram would become king, but then he had to choose his pati dharma in terms of the boons that he had given to Ma Kekai, uh, rather than make Ram the king which
yeah.
he had promised his praja as a raja.
Actually, that's an interesting subject.
Mhm.
Dashrath actually did not tell Sri Ram to go to the forest. You know that?
Mhm. Yeah.
It's interesting. We always think that, he went because his father told him to go. No, he went even though his
Yeah,
father told him not to go.
not to go. Yes.
Mhm.
His father actually told him not to go because what happened was his father was so distressed at the parting that he said to him, he says, I gave this promise. I was foolish. I was bewitched by Keke because she was very beautiful and she was also much younger than him. So he was like besotted by her. So he says, I gave her this promise and that was my foolishness. He says, but you don't have to go.
Yeah.
You don't have to go because of my promise. So Sri Ram says, no, I will go because a promise is a promise. So he
Mhm.
went even though his father told him not to go. Do you know his mother also told him not to go? He went when he went to tell his mother that he's leaving.
Mm,
She says, no, I don't give you permission to go. And mother's permission was very important. In Vedic times,
mm,
there's that famous thing, Atiti Devo Bhava. We
yes.
know that, right? But the whole line is Matra Devo Bhava, Pitra Devo Bhava, Acharya Devo Bhava, then Atiti Devo Bhava. So the first is Matra Devo Bhava. The first person that you have to obey and listen to is your mother. And the mother is saying, don't go.
Mhm.
But he disobeys his mother. He disobeys his guru. Guru Vashish says, don't go. Stay. It's okay. Don't go. He disobeys him. And why does he disobey him? For dharma. Because he says that it is wrong for me not to go. Because look at it again. In that circumstance, it was the right thing to do. Why? Because Bharat was a very capable person. He knew that. So he would not be leaving the kingdom in any bad hands. So it was fine. It was dharma. And can you imagine what a bad example it would be to the
If a son
people
did not
that the
follow.
king has given a promise and he's gone back on his promise? A word was sacrosanct in those days. So to break
Mhm.
your promise was a big deal. It wasn't like now where, he say acha and then we don't do it. And we don't think twice about it either, generally. But in those days, it was a big deal. You know,
Not just that,
and
I
besides,
mean, the fact that I think a rishi also pointed it out, right, when he visited Ramji in the forest, that he says that, your father gave this promise. He is now dead. So you can now come back because his promise does not hold water. And Ram says that
Jabali,
if we, yes, Rishi Japali, and he says that if all sons were to forget their father's words and promises as soon as they passed away, what would be the state of our kingdom?
right. And not only that, actually, Jabali didn't really mean it that way. He
Hmm.
uses that's a Charvaka argument.
Yes, of
So
course.
the Charvaka argument, Charvaka is actually Charuvaka, which
Hmm.
means sweet talkers. Literally, it means a sweet talker. Charvaka. So what the Charvakas, their whole philosophy was eat, drink, be merry. Life is here. After that, we don't know what happens, so might as well enjoy yourself while you're here. Now is all that matters. So that was the argument he was trying to use to try and get him to come back.
Mhm.
But he gets a good scolding
Yes.
from Sri Ram. says to him, he says, I don't know how my father had you in his as an advisor, uh, someone who speaks like this, who has no concept of dharma. So that's why, Sri Rama was a dharmagnya. Every time he took a decision, he took it with dharma in mind. He never took decisions just like, for the heck of it
mm,
or for his personal gratification. Whatever decision he took was for the general good. How is this going to affect everybody, the praja, and everybody at large? And it's not only in the praja, even the environment. He was so environment conscious. He was when he was at Chitrakoot and Bharat, and they all come there, right, to try and get him to come back. And Bharat comes with a big army, so they literally trample the place because obviously there's it's a forest area, and when you have all these people coming, big army with elephants and horses and all this, they trample the whole place and ruin. And Sri Ram says, he says, now it's time for us to leave. Why? Let this place regenerate. It's been
mm,
damaged. So he goes deeper into the forest. He says that I don't want them coming back again and again. It was still close enough for them to do that. So he says we must leave. Let the forest regenerate. So that consciousness of the good of everything, whatever
mm,
you do, has to have that thinking that I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for the overall good,
mm.
the good of society, the good of the environment, the good of the world, the good of the universe. You think beyond your little circuit that okay, this makes me happy, but no, is it good for everyone? That was Sri Ram. So I don't know if I went off on a tangent and didn't answer your
Not
question,
at
but
all, not at all, not at all. Actually, we were going to ask you about these two episodes, particularly, and another one, but we'll try covering that as well.
sure.
I'll let Aditi take over. I've taken up a lot of her questions as well.
So ma'am, like when we talk of Ramayana, of course we talk of Sri Ram, we talk of Ma Sita, and we talk of, Dashrath and Lakshman. But like another important component is Ravan. And how do you see Ravan in the larger framework of Dharma and Adharma? Because if we look at it from like a typical lens, technically he was very, I wouldn't call him pious, but he used to do his rituals. I would put it
Mhm.
out like that. So how do you see him in the context of Dharma and Adharma?
Ravan is a very interesting character. You know why he's interesting? Because as you said, he has so much going for him. He's not, a bad guy in quotes that you can say everything was bad about him. No, he had a lot of good qualities. So, what were his good qualities? Let's talk about that first. He was first of all, he was from a very good family, in the sense that he was, Pulastya was his grandfather, you know, and then his father was Vishravas, where he was a great rishi. Hmm? And so he came from that lineage. And because of that, he had studied the Vedas and everything as a young boy. So he was learned. He was also very talented. He was a very talented musician. He was a great warrior. He knew with weapons. He had a very good knowledge of weapons. And he was a good ruler. Lanka was a very prosperous kingdom. His people were happy. They were all well off. The standard of living was high. In fact, when Hanuman first sees Lanka, that's one of the things he thinks. He says, how can we ever, make any inroads into this place? It's so prosperous. The people are so happy. How can we create? He thinks of employing the strategy of Bheda. And he says, now, how can we do this here? Because that you have to do that, people have to, there has to be dissatisfaction. And he says, but there is no dissatisfaction here. So how do we make inroads here? So that's how much Ravan had going for him. Now, what was his fatal flaw? He had a fatal flaw, and that fatal flaw was self-absorption. That
mm,
means he only thought of things from his own point of view. He had what they call an Asuri mentality. You know what an Asuri mentality is? An Asuri mentality is someone who is not concerned with how painful those actions may be for somebody else. They want what they want at any cost. So if you look,
Self-gratification.
yes, at any cost. So
Yeah.
when you're so self-absorbed, so
Hmm.
selfish and self-absorbed, like he wanted Sita, right? Did she want him? She did not want him. She told him right now, I don't want you. Please send me back to my husband. She told him that from the minute that he tried to take her. She said, I
Hmm.
know, I don't want to go with you. But what was his Rasuri mentality? But I want you. So never mind how
Hmm.
you're feeling, right? So it's not love. See, that mentality is possessiveness. He wanted her as a possession because if he loved her, he would have let her go. You can't love
Hmm.
somebody and then hold them against their wishes, right? So Ravan's fault was that. And it was that selfishness and greed to have stuff for himself, regardless of how it hurt other people. And Sita was not the first woman he abducted. He had done this hundreds of times. There were his whole, he had like so many women who he had taken from just kidnapped. Any woman he saw that he was attracted to, he would try and take her. That was his thing. Then what happened was he tried to take Ramba. In fact, he did. He actually uh, uh, had relations with Ramba against her will, you know,
mm,
and he was cursed for that. And the curse
Hmm.
was that if you ever do this to a woman without her consent, your head will split to 1,000 pieces. Your head will
Hmm.
burst open, and you will be gone. And that's why he doesn't
Cost
you know,
himself
try
only.
anything with Sita. He
Hmm.
has to wait for her to come willingly. And she was never going to come willingly. So that's why, she remained untouched because he could not touch her by force. He
Hmm.
could not. And she was never going to come to him, willingly. So Ravan, people sometimes say, oh, he was great. And, people idolize Ravan. That seems to be a new trend. It's a very wrong trend because how can you idealize someone who is, you know, got an Asuri mentality of uh, only thinking of himself, right? That's not something that's admirable, despite all his wonderful traits. In fact, when Hanuman sees him for the first time in court, he actually is taken in, he's bound and taken by Indrajit uh, to Ravan's court. You know that scene, right? So when he goes, and he's bound because he wants to be bound. It's not like he was
mm,
bound. I think because he was immune to the Brahmastra, and Indrajit uses the Brahmastra to bind him. But actually, Hanuman would not have been affected by the Brahmastra, but he allowed himself to because he wanted to be taken to see
to see
Ravan.
her.
So when he goes there, the first thing he says, he looks at him and he says, "What a magnificent person." Because he was imposing, he was good looking, he was imposing, he had a good body, he was an attractive man. He was not what they show you, an ugly person with the horns, and he was attractive in his own way. So Hanuman says, oh, he's so imposing, and he has so many good qualities, all these, being a learned person and all that. He says it's so sad that he has this terrible, terrible flaw which has pulled him down, which has made him a villain, because he had all the things that could have made him a hero. If he didn't have that flaw, he could have been a hero. But unfortunately, he wasn't. So he was a very dark character because of that personality trait that he had. So that's Ravan.
So, ma'am, I have like a question related to what you essentially said. Um, One is that we've seen like a growing trend of, trying to justify Ravan's character a lot, or
Mm.
his actions that he sort of did. Um, Obviously, there's the whole political angle that I will just disregard. But
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who've come up on, say, Twitter or Instagram, and who say, oh, look at Ravan, so respectful towards women, right? Never touched Ma Sita against her will. Of course, you've explained that part. Then there is a very famous series of books that portrays him as this great thinker who knew that he was going to lose, but he knew that he's in the wrong, and so he had to undertake a war against Sri Ram and lose to him so that Sri Ram could establish dharma. Then there is the notion that is peddled around today that Shurpanakha essentially was very tired of Ravan uh, because of what he had done to her husband. And so she
Mm.
went to Devi Nikumbala, and Devi Nikumbala essentially uh, gave her the strategy कि तुम जाकर बोलो
Oh
कि
my.
ऐसे उकसाओ उसको और बोलो कि वो जाए, uh, hit him where it hits the most. That is, you
Yeah.
tell him that there's this attractive woman and everything. So how do you see that? And I mean, of course, this is a later question as well, but then what lesson is one to take away? Where is one to place his trust? Because there are so many retellings of the Ramayana, right? And there
Yeah.
are a lot from a lot of perspectives. There's one that is very famous that is from Ma Sita's perspective, so to say. And it starts, I mean, as a first time reader, it impacted me a lot because the way that it starts, it talks about how she's writing Ramayana, and it's written in red because red is the color of menstruation, red is the color of the blood, and all of that. And
Mm.
it is so impactful to a reader that you don't realize that you're being fed something that is not a part of Itihasa. So, how do you
I
see that?
I think it's also impactful, or it seems impactful, is when it portrays the character in like a very weak light. Like it's always there's that underlying tone of victimhood.
Hmm,
I didn't choose this, the society is such, the patriarchal
Oh
people around
my.
me. Yeah, there's that tone. Like, I mean, similarly, like a book was also written on, Draupadi. And
hmm,
there's that whole underlying tone of, or Karn, like whenever you either want someone to feel sympathy for a villain or to feel anger against the hero, either the female protagonist is a victim or the villain is a victim to the circumstances and the hero's not like what everyone thinks of them. It's
Yeah.
just that they're whitewashed as such.
So, when you talk about all these different versions, where are they getting this information from? I'm saying because this is not what Valmiki says at all. And Valmiki Ramayana is the only one because Valmiki was a contemporary. So he was there, he was the one who was, knew the story and he wrote it as Itihas.
hmm,
So the others who are writing these things from Sita's point of view or Draupadi's point of view and all these things, where are they getting their facts from? Because they were not there, right? Clearly, they're writing it now. So it's their own imagination which they're putting on Sita and Draupadi. It's their own feelings.
Mm.
It can't be Sita's feelings because she that's how do we know what she felt? The only things we can go by are what we are told by Maharishi Valmiki. And Maharishi Valmiki doesn't portray that at all. In fact, he doesn't portray her as a victim. She is one of the strongest characters in the Ramayana. Do you know when and women was so well regarded in Vedic times? Do you know when this Vanvas thing happens? Uh, Everybody tries to tell Rama not to go, right? And he says, "No, I am going." Do you know what Guru Vashish says? He says, "Okay, fine. You're going. I can't stop you. Go. Leave Sita behind. Why? She is your wife. She can rule. Let her rule in your place." This is there in Valmiki Ramayana. Let her rule. So that was the position of women. She goes because she loves him, and she says, in the Vedic concept, a husband and wife are equal partners. There is no better half or worse half, huh? Half is half. Ardhangini means half my body, right? So that was the thinking. And even in the when they're in the Vanvas and everything, the role she plays is as an equal advisor and partner. She tells him many times. In fact, there's a very interesting episode in the Aranya Kand where the rishis all come to Sri Ram and they say, we are being harassed by these Rakshasas. Please give, help us. You have to help us because they destroy our yagyas and then they come and they try and kill us even and all this. And we are rishis, right? So we can't fight back. So we are looking to you to help us. And Sri Ram says, okay, I will get rid of them all. And after the rishis leave, then this Ma Sita says to him, she says, you gave your promise, but I don't agree with that. I have doubts, and I'm not sure that was the right decision. And I must tell you, she says that you came here um, as a in the as a sannyasi, right? As thing. You didn't come here to fight with people and stuff like that. And besides, these Rakshasas have not done anything to you. So our dharma tells us that you should only uh, attack someone if they have harmed you in self-defense. You should not be going and attacking people who have done nothing to you. So I don't think that is right, you know. And then he explains to her, he says, no, what you've said is correct. One should not do that. But then he says, again, the dharma. In this circumstance, it is dharma for me to do it. Why? Because they are attacking the rishis. The rishis are helpless. They have come to me for protection. I cannot turn them away. To turn away someone who has come to you for protection and not give them the protection they deserve is an adharma. So he explains to her that, though you're right in this circumstance, it is dharma for me to do this. And then she agrees. She says, no, yeah, actually, now I get it. Yeah, you're right. But that's the relationship they had. It wasn't a relationship of her walking meekly 2 steps behind him every way. It was one of mutual partnership. She was an equal partner and he respected her as so, which is why, when he lost her, he goes crazy. He says, I can't live without her. He says, she is me. And he could have gone back to Ayodhya and married anybody he liked. People think he had ego issues and that's why he sent her away. There was no such thing as ego issues. That was not their relationship. We cannot put our modern day thinking onto them. You see? And I think that is a problem. We have to go to the source and see what has Valmiki said. Let us not decide what she felt based on, modern day circumstances. That I think is an injustice. That's doing uh, the Ramayana an injustice. Besides, it's fantasy. It's clearly fantasy. It's
Yes.
not reality. You can write a fantasy on anything. Nobody can stop anyone from writing a fantasy. But personally, I would not. I would go with the original is so beautiful. It is a masterpiece, which is why actually in my book I have not changed it. I have not. I've tried to bring the original to people as Valmiki would have intended, because that's the Itihas. And he's written such a wonderful masterpiece. Who am I to go mess with it and change it around and say, no, this is what I feel? You know, if I've given any interpretation, it's based on his intent, which he puts in the book. As I said, he says right in the beginning, he's writing about dharma. So then in my book, I explain the dharma that he was trying to portray. But beyond that, I don't think one really needs to mess with it. You know, it's a great story. It's a great, great, great masterpiece, you know. So that's what I think. I think we shouldn't put words in Sita's mouth. what she felt and what she didn't feel.
Because they're also from a very, it's not just from a modern lens, it's also from a very narrative-oriented lens. It's not just the modern lens, you know. It's from a lens which is like more focused on creating that divide and that hegemony, you know. कि हाँ ठीक है,
Mm,
like this is what it was.
yeah.
Mm.
They had a very beautiful relationship. They had the sort of relationship that today we die to have. Honestly speaking, if we can have their kind of relationship, you know what it's described is they completed each other. So that was the kind of relationship they had. You know, even when she was told, when she was taken to the ashram, she was very happy to go there because she wanted to go, right?
Mm.
To the ashram, she had said. So it's only when Lakshman says that, listen, I can't bring you back, that she gets upset, because then she realizes that, you know what. So she does get upset. She's obviously, she's a human being, you know, it's very hurtful when you hear that and that you're not. But, you know, she was such a strong person. She tells Lakshman, she says, now you've told me this, now you go back. You know, she says, I know exactly why my husband did this. She says, I know why he did it. He did it for the praja. She says, I know that. So she knew that he was not doubting her. He never doubted her. Actually, even in the Agni Pariksha, it was not, he never asked her to do the Agni Pariksha. That's another misunderstood whole thing. That, you know, he wanted to test her purity and therefore he made her walk through this Agni. He never wanted her to walk through the Agni at all. What did happen? Again, let's go to Valmiki Ramayana and see what happened. Should I go on with this or is
You
this?
can say.
It's okay. Okay. So what happened was Sri Ram missed his wife every minute that they were separated. That's all he could think of. Day and night, he would think of, when will I see her? When will I see her? When will she come back? You know, it was like he was pining for her, literally. And if you read Valmiki Ramayana, you'll see that. It's so emotional, you know, his feelings. He would see the deer and say, oh, you know, they have beautiful eyes. You know, deer have beautiful eyes. They're just like my Sita's eyes. You know, so everything would remind him of her. Okay. When Hanuman meets Sita, he says, you know, he misses you so much, he hardly eats. He only talks about you all the time. So this is the situation. Okay. Now, when the war is over and she comes to meet him, isn't it odd that when he sees her coming, he suddenly becomes very cold? After all these months of, crying and missing her, suddenly when she's there, he becomes very cold. It's odd, isn't it? And there's a reason for it. He says so. What happens is that he knows that they have to go back to Ayodhya. It's almost time to go back, actually. He knows that. And he also knew that society will say things about her. People will say things. He didn't care, but people would say things. And he was concerned. He says, how will that work? When she goes back to Ayodhya, can you imagine how would she feel when people talk badly about her? Right? You can't stop people from talking. You can't stop tongues from wagging. So he pretends that he's very cold and all that, and he pretends to reject her because he wants her to speak up and say that, listen, I'm pure, nothing happened.
Hmm.
That's what he wanted her to say. So, in order to get her to say that, he pretended that he was, like rejecting her. He says, okay, now I've rescued you. You can go wherever you like, but we can't be together. But he does give her a hint. He says, you are like a lamp to a blind person. You know what that is? That is the simile which says that the fault is with who? With the blind person or the lamp? The fault is with the
Blind
blind person,
person.
right? They're not able to see the light. So, what he's saying is, you are like that light, but people will not see that. People will not see your purity. That's what he says. And she says, then, she says, she looks at Lakshman and she says, my character is under question, right? So she says, Chitam me kuru somitre. She says to him, Lakshman, go and make a chitta for me because I want to prove my character. So it's not that he told her to walk through the fire at all. It was her choice, her decision, and she does it because she knew that she would be able to do that. Now, did that really happen? You can say, can a person walk through fire and come out? Right? That would be the question. I don't know. It may be a metaphor. It may be a metaphor for uh, her, going through fire. This is just my imagination, and I don't want to again deviate from the story and give my thoughts on it, but it could be a metaphor. Or it could be something that doesn't happen nowadays. Maybe she had some means. I don't know. But what the story says is that it was her decision to go through the fire entirely. And when she goes through the fire, in the story, Agni carries her out. Agni is a Sakshi, the universal witness. And Agni carries her out, it says, like a father would carry out his child. And Agni says to Sri Ram, here is your Sita. I am Agni, as Sakshi, am saying she is perfectly pure. And you know what his answer is? Yes, I know she is. He says, I never did this for me. He says that. In Valmiki Ramayana, he says, I never did this for me. I did this because I knew that she would be the subject of talk. People, unless she did this, people would talk. And that's why I wanted her to uh, portray her purity in public. I wanted her to speak of her purity in public, to bring it out that yes, now it's proved that she's pure. Not for him. He didn't care one bit. So people who say that, oh no, he did it because he had ego issues, you know, that is just not what is said in the Valmiki Ramayana. So, and in fact, he says, not only, he says, I know that she's pure because of her tejas. He says she has such tejas that nobody could have touched her. He says her tejas is her protection. And he also says she is Vishuddha Trishu Lokeshu, which means purest of the pure in all three worlds, not just on earth. He says, I know that. So he never did it for himself. So that is important to know. And that's why I feel that, it's sad that a lot of our opinions are based on wrong data. So if you base your opinion on fact of what happened based
Hmm.
on Valmiki Ramayana, there will be no confusion. The confusion arises when you read all these other versions, which, especially as you said, the modern ones, which completely say things which are not there. So, I don't want to say anything about anyone's writing. And, please, I'm not here to do that. I'm just saying that there is an original, which is Itihas. We should stick to that. at least
So
for analysis.
yeah. The other ones, like they can be taken as fictions. I mean, even if
Yeah,
someone wants to read
of
them,
course.
they should be taken as fiction and like, for
Yes,
what they are.
with a big pinch of salt. Take it with a
Yes.
big pinch of salt. And then if you enjoy it, go ahead and enjoy it. But don't,
Don't
form your
equate it with
opinion about Sri
reality.
Ram based on something which is somebody's fantasy. That's what I'm saying. That is unfair.
So, ma'am, I wanted to ask you like one final question that if readers were to take away one lesson from your book, Rama, Man of Dharma, what would you hope that it is?
Oh, it says so many that you could take. But if there's one, I would say that would really help us is his lesson of um, maintaining his cool in the most difficult circumstances. Not allowing himself to crumble. And not that is something if we can even do a little bit in our lives. Because life is full of difficulties. And that's what the Ramayana shows you. That even though Sri Ram was an avatar, right? He came here he could have taken an avatar into in a form where there were no difficulties at all, right? He could have, but he took the form, and his life was full of uh, trauma. Just look at the difficulties he went through, right? First of all, about to uh, get this kingdom, and the next day sent to the forest as a literally with nothing, penniless. One day Raja, next day beggar, literally. Then his wife gets kidnapped. Then he has to go get her. Then he brings her back, and then circumstances are such that he has to separate from her. The love of his life, he has to separate from her. Then later, when she comes back, again she goes into the earth. So they never reunite. Just every time, they think they are happy, the happiness is gone. It's kind of like taken away, snatched away from him. So that's a lesson for us, that when we have difficulties in life, we should keep our strength and not crumble. And that's where Vedanta comes in, actually. It gives you that perspective. And why I said Sri Ram was like a walking, talking exemplar of Vedanta is because that's the lesson in Vedanta, is how to handle difficulties with equanimity, which is what he had. So, yeah, that would be the lesson, I think.
So there are very few conversations where you don't have to ask a lot and that you learn so much within the span of like an hour and a half or an hour. This is one of those. We have so much to talk about. We have so much. I mean, we don't want to end it.
Oh,
So this is one of the. I definitely think this is one of the most enjoyable and at the same time very. It was packed with knowledge and packed with a lot of factual information rather than talking about versions of Ramayana here and there. We thank you so much for being with here
thank
today.
you. Thank you for
Uh,
having me.
and we thank our listeners who joined us. We thank you for listening through this session, listening to Ma'am, and we would absolutely recommend that you go, you purchase Ma'am's book, you read it, and that you refer to, as Ma'am said, the original source of information, which is Ramayana as it was meant to be, as a part of Itihasa, which is what happened, right? So
Yes.
instead of relying on other versions, do read factual information and then form your opinion. So thank you so much for being here, and we'll join you next week. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you
ma'am.
for having me. Thank you. I enjoyed myself.